think like, oh, questions about who knew what, when, where, and how. I think because of the last several years, the investigations that have happened, the bankruptcy and how open they've been with all of the documents that had to come out of that, and there still remain a lot of questions. But I think what allows us to dive deeper also into Erika in the second round is there has been more paperwork. You know, the bankruptcy is going after her for a certain amount of money. We know there's a professional, there's a personal. She's been, obviously, when the first one came out, it was right as they were launching the season where she would have to address it, but it really wasn't an issue when the doc came out. It came out early enough in the season. It wasn't really a topic yet. So all of that has kind of snowballed since then. All the things she said on the show, the things that she's accused of saying on the show. And I think one of the big things was that Erika's team agreed to sit down for this one. So you get not just kind of those developments over time, but you get her team's response to a lot of that stuff. And I think that's distinctly what made it different. And Jake he was there on site the day that we sat down with Erika's team.
Yeah, and they were very open. I think, you know, as Knez said, I think getting that perspective in was important to us. And we sit down with Jim Wilkes, who's been a longtime friend of the Girardis and can really speak to how, how it's been for Erika over the last few years. And we also talked to Evan Borges, her attorney, who, is very, very upfront. He had a lot of the same questions that the audience did, and that people watching Bravo did, and directly asked her. And so I think fans will be surprised and find all of that really interesting in that perspective.
And people are going to, like, this, David, people are going to be so interested, I think, particularly in Jim Wilkes. I mean, people have seen them together. They've been photographed together. I think finding out the background of their friendship, their connection over time, how he's known Tom, the kinds of things they did together. I think a lot of that is like fans are just going to they're going to eat that up. It's going to be something that those are questions that they've asked before. They kind of sort of have heard things, but to actually hear it from him. And I think especially in Evan's case, to acknowledge other things about Erika, things that she said on TV, I think that stuff is going to be very, in some cases, surprising to an audience or to a viewer that's been watching her on TV. But I think they're going to find it enlightening and probably in many cases just really interesting.
I would agree. Was that always a plan? Like, okay, let's try to get Erika, let's try to get her team, or did it just kind of happen through like her agreeing to meet with the victims and you're like, wait a second, let's pick up cameras. This is like a gold mine. This is great.
I mean, we're journalists, so of course we want to talk to Erika. Of course we want to talk to her team. Obviously she's a star on a TV show, and that comes with a certain amount of rules. And so we always know that the prospect of getting Erika could potentially be difficult. But she does appear in the doc. She does talk after that victim meeting. So you get to hear from her there. But I think her team also understood how important it was to make sure that they were getting out there. Because I think people have noticed that she's taken kind of a different approach here in the last, like, probably 6 months to a year. And I think that shows in them understanding that it was important for them to take part in this.
I would think so. I mean, I think that's, like you said, there's certain things that go along with getting Erika. Did you guys think it was going to happen? I mean, with her team, because a lot of people say no.
There's a certain amount of like cautious optimism, right? Like we go after every booking, every interview with a good amount of cautious optimism. You want people to say yes. You want them to be able to sit down, trust that they're going to be able to ask questions, answer questions, and take part in a way that feels good and authentic to them. And I think it was a happy surprise when they said yes. But I think we go after even the most difficult or toughest booking that you can think about. We go after it with a lot of cautious optimism.
And do you think, because I think you mentioned this, Jake, or one of you did, like, Erika's a TV star, so there's a lot of the sensationalism. Like, look, as a society, we're drawn to that. But right, like you wanted a victim-centered story, because we hear about like Joe Ruigomez and, Kimberly, Archie. Like, do you, like, was that hard? And like, was that a conscious effort, like not to have that loss? Because it starts, with her meeting the victims and you're all, and then I think to me, like that scene where like Joe is getting in the bath and he's saying like, it takes my pain from like an 8 to a 1 or an 8 to a 3. You're like, yes, let's come back to that. Like, I thought that was just like yeah, okay. Like I could see people just like it's human nature, right? To get lost in the sensationalism of the Aaron Brockovich lawyer and Erika and Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And you're like, oh, wait a second, here we go.
I think we're proud that was the focus of the first one and maintains a through line in this one. And it's one thing to read lawsuits and read bar complaints and even read newspaper articles about this, but to hear from a former client about what they went through, or to hear from Danny Barnes, who said, he went to the State Bar of California time and again to make complaints. And, he feels that it fell on deaf ears. To hear that from a former client themselves, I think is striking. And we wanted to make sure we hit that balance. We still want to get into the larger structure and the larger things. We want to tell the story of that conversation between Erika and the former clients, but we also want to make sure that their stories were top of mind. And I hope we achieved that.
It's powerful, I think, in ways, especially in a visual medium, when you see it in a documentary or you see it on TV, to see something that, again, that you've maybe read or heard about, but it makes it, I think, a lot more relatable. I think a lot of people, even the people who love and love to watch the Beverly Hills, housewives do the things they do in the glamorous way, can definitely relate to the people that we talk to the victims, whether it's, Danny or Joe or Josie. I think they understand and can relate to those lifestyles because it's close enough to what we all live. But yeah, to be able to like hear it from them, to see them, I think is very, very powerful.
Did you guys watch Housewives? Like, are you Bravo fans? Having nothing to do with this, you're a journalist, you have a lot going on. Just curious.
Our other producer, Katie, is a devout Housewives fan. She is like our Bravo reality star go-to encyclopedia. Knez and I dabble and make sure we do our homework and watch. But Katie really is the number one.
She is. I mean, I watched the first, seasons of Housewives when they very first came out. So, I'd watched Orange County and New York and Atlanta, New Jersey and stuff like that. But, like, I think over time, like you fall off, you find different things to watch. But yeah, dabbling here or there. I remember for the first one, I did go back and I watched, I think, every episode from somewhere and see, like probably the beginning of season 6 on. And I think everybody's pulled into different things. I think with Jen Shaw, I have seen a lot of Salt Lake City now. You get pulled into a lot of shows over time, or a lot of reality, especially as you're continuing to do your research and to make sure that you know what you're talking about.
Right. I worked on the Randall scandal, so I had to go back and, get a primer on Vanderpump and
same for Scandival, yeah.
So Scandival. I mean, and speaking of Jen Shaw and all of the aforementioned, like, do you see, just having been journalists and producers, having worked on a bunch of these, like, do you see a common theme, like a personality trait amongst like white collar criminals like Tom, like just, and what is it? Like, I'm just curious as to your opinions. I've had lawyers on and I've talked about this type of stuff before. Like, is it, I'm smarter than the next person? Like, what I'm doing is okay. Like, it's not really hurting anyone.